The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with the usual mixture of languages, each species contributing their own unique sounds to the cacophony. Admiral Zethkar of the Vorthak Empire stood at the central podium, his forearms gesturing dramatically as he addressed the assembled representatives. His crimson scales gleamed under the artificial lighting, and his voice carried the authority of someone who had never known defeat.
Esteemed delegates, Zethkar began, his words translated instantly by the neural implants each representative wore.
We face the most significant military threat our galaxy has seen in 3 centuries. The Scourge fleet approaches the Outer Rim worlds, and preliminary reports suggest their numbers exceed 2 million vessels. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Scourge had been a nightmare whispered about in military academies for generations.
Their biomechanical ships could regenerate from seemingly fatal damage, and their hive mind tactics had overwhelmed every defensive line they encountered. Entire star systems had fallen silent after Scourge encounters, leaving behind only empty space where thriving civilizations once existed. The combined fleets of our major powers will engage them at the Kepler Nexus, Zethkar continued. The Vorthak Empire contributes 800,000 vessels. The Crystalline Collective brings 600,000. The Ethereal Dominion pledges 400,000 ships. He paused, scanning the assembled delegates with his predatory gaze. And, then, we have our newest member species offering their assistance. Ambassador Sarah Chen rose from her seat in the human delegation section.
At barely 5.5 feet tall, she appeared almost childlike compared to the towering alien representatives around her. Her simple black uniform bore no ornate decorations or intimidating armor plating like the other military representatives wore. The Terran Federation offers 12,000 ships, she announced clearly. The chamber fell silent for a moment before erupting in a mixture of sounds that the translation system struggled to process. Some delegates laughed, others chittered in what might have been amusement or derision. The massive insectoid representative from the hive worlds clicked his mandibles in a pattern that clearly indicated dismissal. Zethkar raised one of his hands for silence.
Ambassador Chen, while we appreciate humanity's enthusiasm, perhaps your species might better serve by providing logistical support to the real combat forces? Sarah's expression remained neutral, though those who knew humans might have detected a slight tightening around her eyes.
Admiral, our ships may be fewer in number, but each one carries specialized personnel that could prove invaluable in this engagement.
Specialized personnel? Zethkar's laugh was a harsh sound that needed no translation. What could your species possibly offer that our advanced civilizations have not perfected over millennia? Your people have barely achieved faster than light travel. Your weapons technology is primitive fusion-based systems. Your armor is simple metal alloys. Representative Fexnil of the Ethereal Dominion floated forward, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into prismatic patterns. Humans have shown courage, certainly, but courage alone will not stop the Scourge. Their vessels lack proper energy shielding. Their crews have no telepathic coordination capabilities. They cannot even manipulate matter at the quantum level. What the esteemed representative means, added Counselor Vex from the Machine Republic, his mechanical voice perfectly modulated, is that human technology appears to rely on kinetic projectiles? Surely these cannot penetrate Scourge bioarmor that has proven immune to our most advanced plasma weapons. Sarah waited for the murmurs to die down before responding. What we offer is not advanced technology in the way you understand it. We offer precision. Precision? Zethkar's scales rippled with what passed for amusement among his species. The Scourge ships are massive, Ambassador. They are not targets that require precision. They require overwhelming firepower, which your 12,000 ships simply cannot provide. We don't plan to engage their ships directly in the main battle, Sarah replied calmly. Our vessels will position themselves at extreme range, far beyond the engagement zone. This caused another round of confused sounds from the assembled delegates. Combat doctrine across all known species involved closing to optimal firing range and unleashing maximum firepower. The idea of remaining at extreme range seemed to contradict everything these civilizations understood about space warfare. At extreme range, your weapons will be completely ineffective, stated General Crox of the Reptilian Assembly, his massive frame shaking with what might have been laughter.
Even our most powerful energy weapons suffer significant degradation beyond 50,000 kilometers. Your primitive kinetic weapons would be utterly useless at such distances.
Our snipers disagree, Sarah said quietly. Snipers?
The word had no direct translation in most galactic languages, and the translation systems struggled to find appropriate equivalents.
The closest concept seemed related to hunters or assassins.
Individual marksmen who engage targets at extreme range with single, precisely placed shots, Sarah explained.
It's a military tradition that dates back thousands of years on Earth.
The chamber fell silent again, but this time the silence carried a different quality. It was the silence of beings trying to process a concept that seemed to make no logical sense. Sethkar's voice carried a note of barely concealed disdain.
You're suggesting that individual soldiers, firing single projectiles, could somehow affect the outcome of a battle involving millions of vessels?
I'm suggesting that sometimes the smallest action, precisely applied, can change everything, Sarah replied. The massive delegate from the Titanium Reaches, a species that had evolved from living metal, spoke with a voice like grinding gears.
This is absurd. Modern warfare is about energy output, shield frequency modulation, quantum torpedo volleys.
It is about mathematics and overwhelming force projection. Your species appears to be clinging to primitive concepts that have no place in galactic warfare.
Perhaps, Sarah acknowledged.
But our primitive concepts have served us well throughout our history. From ancient Earth battlefields to the void between stars, we've learned that sometimes the most sophisticated enemy can be defeated by someone with steady hands and perfect patience. Representative Thexnill's crystalline form pulsed with light patterns that indicated deep thought.
Even assuming your marksman could somehow achieve accuracy at extreme range, what targets could they possibly engage that would matter?
Scourge vessels regenerate from damage within minutes.
Destroying small components would be meaningless. Who said anything about destroying components? Sarah asked. Then, what exactly do these snipers of yours plan to target?
That, Sarah said with the faintest hint of a smile, is what makes them particularly effective.
While everyone else focuses on destroying the enemy, we focus on stopping them.
The confusion in the chamber was palpable.
Warfare, as understood by every species present, was about one fundamental principle: apply enough force to eliminate the enemy's ability to fight.
The human approach seemed to suggest something else entirely, something that challenged millennia of tactical doctrine.
Zethkar's frustration was evident in the rapid color changes across his scales. Ambassador Chen, with respect to your species' courage, this council cannot base our defensive strategy on mysterious human tactics that make no tactical sense.
The Scourge will arrive at the Kepler Nexus in 72 hours.
We need proven combat effectiveness, not philosophical riddles.
Then, let us prove our effectiveness, Sarah said simply. Deploy your fleets according to your battle plan. Position our ships at the coordinates we'll provide, well beyond the engagement zone. If our snipers fail to demonstrate their worth in the first 10 minutes of combat, we'll withdraw and leave the battle to your conventional forces. And, if you succeed, asked Counselor Vex, his mechanical mind apparently intrigued by the statistical impossibility of the human claim.
If we succeed, you'll see why humanity has never lost a war we've chosen to fight.
The chamber erupted in discussion, but Admiral Zethkar quickly called for order.
Very well, Ambassador. Against my better judgment, we will allow this demonstration.
But, understand that when your mysterious tactics inevitably fail, the real business of warfare will commence with strategies developed over millions of years by civilizations far more advanced than yours. Understood, Admiral, Sarah replied, gathering her simple datapad and preparing to leave. Though I should mention one thing about those millions of years of advanced civilization.
What's that? Zethkar asked with barely concealed annoyance. Sometimes experience can become a blind spot. You've all fought enemies who think like you do, who approach warfare the way you do. You've never fought humans.
As the human delegation filed out of the chamber, the other representatives continued their discussions about fleet positioning, energy weapon configurations, and shield harmonics. None of them paid much attention to the simple request from the human fleet commander for positioning data on something called high-value individual targets. Meanwhile, aboard the Terran Federation flagship Patience of Earth, Master Gunnery Sergeant Maria Santos was making final preparations with her team. The ship's cargo hold had been converted into something the galaxy had never seen, a firing position designed for extreme-range precision shooting in the vacuum of space. The alien ships all follow predictable patterns, she explained to her 12-person sniper team as they reviewed tactical data. Their command structures are hierarchical. Their communications rely on specific individuals in key positions. Their combat coordination depends on particular crew members maintaining complex quantum entanglement networks. Corporal Jackson, a young man whose steady hands had earned him a place on this elite team, studied the alien ship schematics on his display.
So we're not shooting at ships, we're shooting at people.
Not exactly, Santos corrected. We're shooting at the right people at exactly the right moment.
The aliens think in terms of destroying ships.
We think in terms of disrupting the individuals who make those ships effective.
The rest of the team nodded their understanding.
They were all veterans of campaigns where precision mattered more than firepower, where a single well-placed shot had changed the course of entire battles. They understood something that the galaxy's great military minds apparently did not: wars weren't won by ships or weapons or even tactics.
They were won by the people who made critical decisions under pressure.
The enemy is expecting energy weapons, plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, Santos continued.
They've adapted their bioarmor to regenerate from that kind of damage.
They're not expecting projectiles moving at relativistic speeds, guided by human eyes and human intuition. What's our target priority? Asked Staff Sergeant Kim, whose record for longest confirmed kill had stood for 3 years before this mission was conceived.
Command nodes first.
The Scourge relies on hive mind coordination, but even hive minds have key relay points. Take out the right relay organisms, and you create gaps in their coordination network. After that, we target navigation specialists, tactical coordinators, and regeneration controllers. The team spent the next several hours running through simulations, calculating trajectories that would carry their projectiles across hundreds of thousands of kilometers of empty space while accounting for gravitational influences, target movement, and the specific characteristics of Scourge bioships. To the rest of the galaxy, what they were attempting was impossible. Projectile weapons in space combat were considered obsolete because they required perfect prediction of target movement across vast distances. But that was exactly what human snipers had been perfecting for centuries: the ability to calculate not just where a target was, but where it would be when a precisely fired shot reached it. As the countdown to battle began, the great fleets of the galaxy took their positions according to centuries of tactical doctrine. Massive formations of ships armed with the most sophisticated weapons known to galactic civilization prepared to engage an enemy that had never been defeated. And, in the darkness between the fleets, 12 small human ships positioned themselves at distances their allies considered useless, carrying weapons their allies considered primitive, manned by specialists whose capabilities their allies could not understand.
The galaxy was about to learn why humans had always believed that sometimes the smallest force, applied at exactly the right point, could move the entire universe.
The Scourge fleet emerged from hyperspace like a plague of living metal and flesh. 2 million biomechanical vessels materialized at the edge of the Kepler nexus, their forms defying conventional ship design. Some resembled massive insects with weapon-laden carapaces that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns.
Others looked like enormous organs suspended in crystalline frameworks, their surfaces rippling with regenerative tissue that could seal hull breaches within seconds. Admiral Zethkar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the sensor readings with growing unease.
"By the void," he muttered, his forearms working frantically at different control stations.
Intelligence reports were wrong. They're not just larger than expected, they're unlike anything we've encountered.
The lead Scourge vessel dominated the viewscreen, a nightmarish fusion of organic curves and mechanical precision that stretched nearly 50 kilometers from tip to tail. Its surface writhed with what looked like circulatory systems pumping unknown fluids, while arrays of weapons that resembled thorned vines tracked potential targets across the battlefield.
"All fleets report ready, Admiral," his communications officer announced. "Vortak Empire battle groups Alpha through Gamma in forward positions. Crystalline Collective maintaining rear support formation. Ethereal Dominion flanking squadrons achieving optimal energy matrix alignment."
And the humans?
Zethkar asked, though his tone suggested he'd nearly forgotten about them entirely.
Terran Federation vessels maintaining position at extreme range, sir.
They appear to be waiting. Waiting for what?
Zethkar wondered aloud, then dismissed the thought.
No matter. Begin the engagement. All ships, open fire on my command.
The opening moments of the battle unfolded exactly as galactic military doctrine predicted. The massive alien fleets discharged their primary weapons in coordinated volleys, sending streams of plasma, quantum torpedoes, and exotic energy beams across the void toward scourge formations. The display on every viewscreen lit up like a deadly fireworks show as millions of projectiles crossed the space between the opposing forces. The scourge response was immediate and terrifying.
Their bioweapons fired projectiles that seemed alive, twisting through space like serpents seeking prey.
Where they struck Alliance ships, the impact points began to corrode and spread, eating through hull plating like acid through tissue. Direct hit on battle cruiser Eternal Glory, reported the tactical officer. The damage is spreading, Admiral. The bioweapon appears to be converting our hull material into more of itself.
Impossible, Zethkar growled. Redirect Squadron 7 to support them. Continue the assault.
But, as the minutes passed, it became clear that conventional tactics were failing. Alliance weapons that struck scourge vessels caused impressive explosions and apparent damage, but within minutes the biomechanical ships began regenerating. Hull breaches sealed themselves. Destroyed weapon arrays regrew. Even vessels that appeared completely disabled slowly rebuilt themselves using materials somehow extracted from space itself.
Admiral, the communications officer called out with barely controlled panic in his voice.
We've lost 18 ships in the first 10 minutes.
Enemy casualties appear to be 0.
The viewscreen showed the horrible truth. While Alliance vessels burned and died, the Scourge fleet advanced in perfect formation, their biomechanical ships regenerating damage faster than the galaxy's most advanced weapons could inflict it. Several Alliance ships had been completely consumed by the spreading bioweapons, leaving behind only expanding clouds of converted matter that the Scourge somehow harvested to fuel their advance. Sir, the tactical officer reported, the Crystalline Collective is requesting permission to fall back and regroup.
Their energy matrix weapons are having no measurable effect on enemy armor. Denied, Zethkar snapped. We hold this line. Increase firing rate to maximum. All ships focus fire on single targets.
But, even as he gave the order, he knew it was futile. The concentrated fire of dozens of ships could seemingly destroy a Scourge vessel, only to watch it rebuild itself within minutes. Meanwhile, every shot from the enemy fleet seemed to find its mark, and every hit proved devastating to Alliance forces. That was when Master Gunnery Sergeant Santos spoke quietly into her comm unit aboard the human flagship Patience of Earth.
All snipers, this is Overwatch. Target acquisition is complete.
I have eyes on primary command node, vessel designation Scourge Alpha 1.
Range, 473,000 kilometers.
The distance was so vast that light from the target took over 1.5 seconds to reach human sensors. At such a range, conventional wisdom said that any projectile weapon was useless.
The target could move multiple kilometers in any direction during the flight time of even the fastest kinetic projectile.
But, conventional wisdom had never accounted for human intuition. Target is a biomechanical relay organism positioned on the dorsal command spine, Santos continued, her voice steady despite the chaos of battle raging in the distance. Based on movement patterns over the last 12 minutes, the organism follows a predictable cycle.
It extends to coordinate fleet-wide telepathic commands every 47 seconds.
Through her scope, a marvel of human engineering that could track targets across impossible distances, Santos could see something no alien sensor had detected.
The massive Scourge command ship wasn't just randomly regenerating and attacking. It was breathing.
Its biological components followed rhythms and patterns that, once understood, became predictable.
Next coordination pulse in 15 seconds, she announced.
Accounting for target movement, gravitational influence from the binary star system, and projectile flight time, firing.
The projectile that left Santos's rifle was nothing like the exotic weapons the galaxy's great powers employed.
It was a simple piece of dense metal, accelerated to nearly 10% of light speed by magnetic coils that human engineers had perfected through centuries of refinement. No energy signature to detect, no exotic particles to track, no quantum entanglement to disrupt. Just a piece of metal flying through space with perfect precision. At the same instant, 11 other human snipers fired at targets throughout the Scourge fleet. Their shots were synchronized not by computer systems or telepathic links, but by human timing honed through years of training together. They had learned to think as one mind while maintaining individual precision, a skill that no alien species had ever developed. The shots flew through space for nearly 8 minutes, invisible to every sensor system on the battlefield. Alliance forces continued their desperate assault, unaware that salvation was traveling toward them in the form of 12 small pieces of metal moving at relativistic speeds. Santos kept her scope trained on the target, watching the command organism as it went through its predictable cycle. 7 seconds to impact, she announced calmly.
Admiral Zethkar was preparing to order a general retreat when something impossible happened.
The massive Scourge command ship, which had been coordinating the enemy fleet's devastating assault, suddenly began to shudder. "Sir," the tactical officer called out in confusion, "the lead enemy vessel appears to be malfunctioning. No energy discharge detected, no apparent weapon impact, but its coordination signals have ceased."
On the view screen, the result was immediate and dramatic.
The Scourge fleet, which had been moving in perfect synchronization, suddenly lost its coordination. Ships that had been advancing in flawless formation began to drift slightly off course. The devastating accuracy of their bioweapons decreased markedly as targeting information stopped flowing from the command vessel.
"Scourge Alpha 1 is neutralized," Santos reported. "Target 2, you're up."
Corporal Jackson had been tracking a different kind of target, a specialized organism that coordinated the regenerative systems across multiple Scourge vessels. His shot, fired 9 minutes earlier, reached its target just as the creature began its regeneration coordination cycle. The result was spectacular. 17 Scourge ships that had been steadily regenerating from Alliance weapon hits suddenly stopped their healing process.
Hull breaches remained open. Damaged weapon arrays stayed broken. For the first time in the battle, destroyed Scourge equipment stayed destroyed. What's happening to them?
Zethkar demanded, watching enemy ships that had seemed invulnerable suddenly become vulnerable. He didn't have to wait long for the answer. Across the Scourge fleet, key organisms responsible for navigation, targeting, regeneration, and coordination were being eliminated by shots that had been fired before the battle had even begun. Human snipers had studied the enemy, identified the critical biological components that made their ships function, and calculated the precise timing needed to disrupt them at the moment when their loss would cause maximum disruption. "Sir," the communications officer announced with growing excitement, "the Ethereal Dominion reports that their weapons are now causing permanent damage to enemy vessels. The Crystalline Collective confirms that Scourge regeneration capabilities appear to be offline across multiple target groups."
"How is this possible?"
Zethkar muttered, his tactical mind struggling to process what he was seeing.
That was when Ambassador Sarah Chen's voice came through on the fleet command channel. "Admiral Zethkar, this is Ambassador Chen aboard the Terran Federation flagship.
Our snipers have successfully eliminated primary command and control organisms across the Scourge fleet. Enemy coordination is disrupted, and regeneration capabilities are offline for approximately 60% of their vessels."
"You're what?"
Zethkar's voice carried a mixture of disbelief and dawning comprehension.
"Our snipers, Admiral. 12 marksmen with kinetic projectiles, engaging targets that your sensors couldn't even detect. We told you we focus on precision rather than firepower."
The tactical situation continued to evolve rapidly. Scourge vessels that had seemed unstoppable were now struggling with systems failures, navigation errors, and an inability to coordinate their attacks. Alliance forces, suddenly, facing an enemy that could actually be damaged, pressed their advantage with renewed vigor. "Admiral," the tactical officer reported with something approaching awe in his voice, "enemy fleet cohesion is collapsing.
Multiple vessels are firing on their own formations, apparently unable to distinguish allies from enemies.
Several ships have begun retreating without orders.
Scourge Alpha 7 is attempting to re-establish command authority, Santos reported calmly from her sniper position. Eliminating backup command organism now.
Another shot, fired with the same impossible precision as the others, reached its target just as a secondary command organism attempted to restore fleet coordination. The creature's destruction sent cascade failures through the Scourge biomechanical systems, causing additional ships to lose their ability to function as part of the larger fleet. "This is impossible," Sethkar said, but his tone had changed from disbelief to something approaching respect.
"How did you know where to shoot? How did you even know what to shoot at?"
Sarah's voice carried a note of quiet pride. "Admiral, while your species developed advanced technology to solve military problems, humans developed advanced observation skills. We learned to watch our enemies, to understand how they think and how they function, and to identify the crucial weak points that technology alone cannot reveal." "But the range," protested Representative Fexnil over the communication channel. "The precision required for such shots across hundreds of thousands of kilometers is exactly what human snipers have been perfecting for thousands of years," Sarah replied. "We may not have your energy weapons or your quantum computers, but we have something you apparently don't: the ability to make impossible shots when everything depends on it."
As the battle continued, the tide turned completely. Scourge vessels that had seemed invincible were now struggling with cascading system failures.
Their biomechanical advantage had been turned against them by humans who understood that every living system, no matter how advanced, had critical points of failure. "All Alliance fleets," Admiral Zethkar announced, his voice carrying newfound respect for his human allies, "press the attack.
Target enemy vessels showing system failures. The humans have given us our chance." But the humans weren't finished. As Alliance forces engaged the crippled Scourge vessels, the human sniper teams continued their methodical elimination of critical targets throughout the enemy fleet.
Navigation specialists, tactical coordinators, regeneration controllers, and communication relay organisms fell one by one to shots that had been carefully planned and perfectly executed. "Final target acquired," Santos announced.
Enemy fleet admiral organism, vessel Scourge Alpha Prime. Range, 612,000 kilometers.
This shot would be the most difficult yet, across a distance that seemed to defy the possibility of accuracy. But, as Santos lined up her scope, she knew something that the galaxy's great military minds were only beginning to understand: sometimes the most important victory came not from having the biggest weapon, but from having the patience and skill to place the smallest projectile exactly where it needed to be. The shot, when it came, would change everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare. The shot that would end the Battle of Kepler Nexus flew through space for 11 minutes and 37 seconds. During that time, the Alliance forces pressed their advantage against the disrupted Scourge fleet, but everyone who understood what was happening held their breath, waiting for the impossible to become reality. Master Gunnery Sergeant Santos maintained her position, scope trained on the distant target, watching the massive biomechanical organism that served as the supreme command node for the entire Scourge invasion force. Through her scope's advanced tracking systems, she could see the creature's rhythmic movements, the way it pulsed with bioluminescent signals that coordinated millions of vessels across the battlefield. 30 seconds to impact, she announced quietly. Admiral Zethkar found himself watching the tactical display with fascination and growing respect. The human approach to warfare was unlike anything in his experience. While his people had developed increasingly sophisticated weapons to solve military problems, humans had apparently spent their time developing increasingly sophisticated ways to understand their enemies.
"Ambassador Chen," he said over the communication channel, "I must ask. How did your people identify these organisms that my sensors cannot even detect?" Sarah's reply came with a hint of amusement.
"Admiral, you've been fighting wars using sensors and computers for so long that you've forgotten the most powerful sensor system ever developed. Which is
human observation. We watched. We studied.
We learned to see patterns that your instruments miss because they're looking for the wrong things."
10 seconds to impact, Santos reported. The projectile, a simple piece of dense metal no larger than a human thumb, struck the Scourge fleet admiral organism with perfect precision.
The creature, which had been in the process of coordinating a desperate attempt to regain fleet cohesion, simply ceased to exist.
The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the Scourge fleet. Every vessel in the Armada suddenly lost all higher-level coordination. Ships that had been moving in formation began to drift apart. Weapons systems that had been firing in coordinated volleys fell silent or began firing randomly. The biomechanical vessels, deprived of their command structure, reverted to basic survival instincts that made them completely useless as military assets. "Confirmed kill," Santos announced with professional satisfaction. "Enemy fleet command is eliminated." Across the battlefield, 2 million Scourge vessels that had seemed unstoppable just minutes earlier were now nothing more than a collection of confused, directionless biomechanical entities. Some began attacking each other, their primitive survival instincts kicking in. Others simply stopped moving entirely, their biological components shutting down in the absence of command signals. "By the void," Zethkar whispered, staring at the tactical display in amazement. "They've done it. 12 humans with primitive kinetic weapons have defeated an invasion force that our greatest military minds said was unstoppable." "Sir," his tactical officer reported with unconcealed awe, "enemy fleet is in complete disarray. Multiple vessels are powering down. Others are beginning to consume each other. Scourge invasion force is effectively neutralized." The cleanup operation took less than an hour. Alliance forces, no longer facing coordinated resistance, methodically destroyed the confused and directionless Scourge vessels. Without their command organisms and coordination systems, the biomechanical ships proved surprisingly fragile when faced with concentrated firepower. As the last Scourge vessel was eliminated, Admiral Zethkar requested a direct communication link with the human flagship. When Ambassador Chen's face appeared on his screen, he found himself looking at her with entirely new eyes. "Ambassador," he began, then paused, searching for words that could express what he was feeling. "I owe you and your people an apology. We dismissed your capabilities based on our own assumptions about what constitutes advanced warfare." "No apology necessary, Admiral," Sarah replied graciously. "Every species develops military doctrine based on their own strengths and experiences. You couldn't have known about capabilities you'd never encountered." "But that's exactly the point," Zethkar insisted. "We should have listened. We should have tried to understand what you were offering instead of dismissing it because it didn't fit our preconceptions." Representative Thexnil of the Ethereal Dominion joined the communication, her crystalline form pulsing with light patterns that indicated deep thought. "Ambassador Chen, I must ask. How did your species develop such unusual military capabilities?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "Representative Thexnil, I think the answer lies in how humans have always approached conflict. We're not the strongest species, or the fastest, or the most technologically advanced. Throughout our history, we've had to win by being smarter, more observant, and more adaptable than our enemies. But the precision required," Counselor Vex of the Machine Republic interjected, his mechanical mind still struggling with the statistical impossibility of what he'd witnessed. "The calculations involved in those shots defy probability." "Do they?" Sarah asked. "Or do they simply require a different kind of calculation than what your computers perform? Human snipers don't just calculate trajectories and wind speeds. They learn to read their enemies, to understand their patterns and rhythms, to predict not just where a target will be, but when it will be most vulnerable." Master Gunnery Sergeant Santos's voice came through the communication channel as she and her team secured their equipment. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am?" "Granted, Sergeant. What we do isn't just about the shot," Santos explained to the assembled alien representatives. "It's about patience. It's about watching an enemy long enough to understand how they think, how they move, what makes them vulnerable. Your species developed weapons that can destroy anything. We developed the ability to know exactly what needs to be destroyed and when." General Crox of the Reptilian Assembly, who had been notably silent during the battle, finally spoke up. "Sergeant Santos, your demonstration today has fundamentally challenged everything we thought we knew about military effectiveness. A single well-placed shot proving more decisive than millions of energy weapons." "With respect, General," Santos replied, "that's been true throughout human history. We've always believed that sometimes the smallest force, applied at exactly the right point, can change everything. Admiral Zethkar studied the tactical display showing the debris field where the mighty Scourge fleet had been. Ambassador Chen, I have one more question.
Your sniper teams eliminated specific organisms within enemy vessels across impossible distances.
How did you even know those organisms existed?
That's the key difference between human military doctrine and yours, Sarah explained.
You develop technology to solve problems. We develop understanding to prevent problems.
While you were building better weapons, we were studying our enemies to find ways to make weapons unnecessary.
Unnecessary? Zethkar asked, confused.
Think about what happened today, Sarah continued.
We didn't destroy the Scourge fleet with superior firepower. We simply removed their ability to function as a coordinated force.
The actual destruction was accomplished by your conventional weapons once the enemy was no longer capable of effective resistance.
The implications were staggering. Human military doctrine wasn't about building better ways to kill enemies, but about understanding enemies well enough to neutralize them with minimal force.
It was a complete paradigm shift that challenged millennia of galactic military thinking.
Sergeant Santos, Representative Fexnell asked, how long did your people spend studying the Scourge to develop this approach?
About 6 hours, Santos replied matter-of-factly. The silence that followed was profound. 6 hours of human observation had accomplished what the galaxy's greatest military minds had thought impossible.
6 hours? Zethkar repeated weakly.
We had good intelligence data from the advanced scouts, Santos explained. Once we knew what to look for, identifying critical biological systems and behavioral patterns was straightforward.
The hard part wasn't understanding the enemy, it was convincing everyone to let us try our approach. Ambassador Chun smiled. That's another thing about humans, Admiral.
We're very good at seeing solutions that others miss, partly because we don't assume that the conventional approach is the only approach. Over the following weeks, as the galaxy began to process what had happened at the Kepler Nexus, human military advisors were suddenly in great demand. Species that had dismissed humanity's primitive technology were now desperately interested in learning human observation techniques and tactical thinking. The Galactic Council established a new military doctrine committee with human representation, acknowledging that advanced technology meant nothing without the wisdom to use it effectively. Military academies across the galaxy began incorporating human-taught courses on enemy observation and precision tactics. But, perhaps the most significant change was in how the galaxy viewed the relationship between technology and capability. The Battle of Kepler Nexus proved that sometimes the most advanced civilizations could be defeated by opponents who understood them better than they understood themselves. Master Gunnery Sergeant Santos, now promoted and assigned to the Galactic Military Academy as an instructor, often began her lectures with a simple statement that became famous throughout the galaxy: anyone can build a bigger gun. The real skill is knowing exactly where to aim it. Ambassador Sarah Chen, speaking at the ceremony that formally recognized humanity's contribution to galactic security, perhaps summed it up best. Today we learned that true military advancement isn't about developing better ways to destroy our enemies. It's about developing better ways to understand them. When you truly understand your enemy, victory often requires surprisingly little force. The galaxy had dismissed humanity's snipers as primitive throwbacks to an earlier age of warfare. They learned instead that sometimes the oldest wisdom, applied with modern precision, could accomplish what the most advanced technology could not. The Scourge invasion was over, defeated not by the galaxy's mightiest weapons, but by 12 humans who understood that the key to victory lay not in having the biggest guns, but in knowing exactly where to aim them and when to pull the trigger. And, in the depths of space, where the debris of 2 million Scourge vessels slowly dispersed among the stars, the galaxy learned a lesson that humanity had known for millennia: sometimes the smallest action, perfectly timed and precisely executed, could indeed move the entire universe.